Today we shall discuss about the procedure for the design. So there is a step-by-step procedure for making a design to a component, a machine element. Okay, so let us discuss each and every step one by one. So the first step in any design is the recognition of need. So why do you go for design? Why should we invent a new thing? What is the necessity of going for a innovation? Do the work easily. That means until now the work is requiring some effort, extra effort. కొంచెం కష్టంగా ఉంది, right? So you have to overcome the difficulty in doing the work. So that is the need. So for that purpose, we have to make a new design. Maybe it is a new design or adaptive design. Okay? Well, so that has to be identified first. So the first and foremost task is to identify the need or to select the problem. So without any problem, you cannot go for design simply. Okay? So once you have identified that some problems are being faced due to that particular element or in that particular area, then you have to identify that and state the problem clearly. See, my aim is to overcome the difficulty of lifting the load from this place to another place. So for that purpose, you have to make a design. You have to produce a mechanical element which will ease the process of lifting the place from one place to another place. So that is the problem definition. So you have clearly stated the problem. And then the second one is you have to study the problem clearly. What is the work involved in the problem? What has to be done? What is being done presently? So presently, for example, the work is being towed or it is dragged on the floor. So which is a difficult task. So you have to study that first. So you have to study the existing method of doing the work. Okay, so that will come under analysis of the problem. If there is a machine which is already being in use, but with that machine you are facing the problem, then in such cases you have to study the machine. You have to study the mechanism of the machine. So with this mechanism you are facing the problem. So that's why you have to study the mechanism. You have to understand the mechanism, how the components are being interlinked, how the components are attached to one another, and how they are functioning, how the relative motion is transferred from one link to another link. So that study has to be performed. So that is the second stage, study the problem or mechanism. So this stage is also called as synthesis. So here you are studying the existing things. Okay? And then you have to go for the analyzing problem. Okay? You have identified the problem in the first stage and you have studied the problem in the second stage. And the third one is analyzing the problem. So what has to be done to overcome the problem? So that has to be brainstorming should be done in this case. So that is analyzing the problem. So in this case, if necessary, you have to draw the free body diagrams of forces in terms of magnitudes and directions. See, for example, in this machine, on this particular element, it is being failed every time. So then you have to study what are the different forces acting on that particular component. Okay, so that is nothing but analyzation. So if necessary, you have to draw a free body diagram. Say for example, if this is the connecting rod. Okay, now what are the forces acting? See, a force is acting like this, a force is acting like this. So like this you have to draw the free body diagrams like this. So by drawing the free body diagram, you can understand the behavior of the forces on the element. So this will come under analyzation. That is analysis of the problem. And then, so you have identified the problem, you have studied the problem well, you have studied the mechanism, and then you have analyzed the problem also. That means you have identified where the bug is. Okay. Then you are going to design the improvement or a modification. You are going to propose a modification, or you are going to making a new design. So for that purpose, you have to select proper material and mechanism. So we have discussed already about this material in the previous class. Okay, so we have to choose proper material which suits to the working conditions in terms of its size, shape, cost, everything you have to consider, and you have to choose proper material. And also mechanism. See, existing mechanism is faulty, so that's why you have to modify it, or you have to change it completely. So you have to select proper mechanism, once again without impairing the basic function. The basic function should not be disturbed, but the mechanism has to be changed. That means previously these two links were attached. Now let us attach these two things. Like that, you have to make necessary changes in order to remove the problem. Okay, so that is selection of proper material and mechanism, and then you have to determine the size of the part. Size of the part in the sense you have to determine the dimensions of the product to be designed. Say length, breadth, width, height, diameter. So all these things have to be determined. So before determining this, you must select proper factor of safety. So you will be given with the strength of the materials, loads, everything, and then you have to find out the sizes of the component. So before determining the size directly, you have to select proper factor of safety. So we shall discuss about factor of safety in detail in another session. Okay. So once the factor of safety is selected, then you have to determine the size of the component. And once again, this factor of safety depends upon the material, the process, okay, and the working conditions also. So based on this, you have to choose proper factor of safety, and then you have to determine the size of the component based on the strength of the material and the load conditions prevailing in the working area. Okay, and then modify the design. So you have determined the size. That means you have designed that element. Then you have to make necessary modifications. You cannot straight away go for the manufacturing. You have to analyze the existing design, analyze the new design once again. Generally, if we want to revise the work once again by ourselves, you cannot find any problems. You cannot find any loopholes. If I give my work to you, you can identify my weakness or loopholes in the work. So that's why our design has to be presented to an expert or your colleagues, so that he will analyze the new design and makes necessary changes if any. See, generally those changes are like in terms of manufacturing requirements, and functional requirements and assembly requirements. So based on these requirements, you have to modify the design. What does it mean? Manufacturing requirements. For example, you have created a new part, new design, in which it requires a honing operation. Honing, you know what is meant by honing. So it's a finishing operation to the whole. Okay, but we don't have that facility in our work area. That means we don't have that honing machine. Then what shall we do? This design cannot be adopted in our working area. So that's why you have to make necessary changes in the process. So instead of honing, you may go for lapping or you may go for grinding. So like that you have to make necessary changes in the design based on the manufacturing requirements. Similarly, functional requirements. See, I have given the design to an expert. So he had studied the prototype and he is saying that during its function it behaves like this, which is not desirable. So that's why you have to make changes to it. So based on that, you have to make the changes to the design. Similarly, assembly requirements. So there may be some difficulties in the assembly. For example, you have to join two parts, for which you have to use a 8 mm bolt or a 7 mm bolt. You have designed it. The 7 mm bolt is not available. Then what shall we do? You have to use 8 mm bolt. In such cases, you have to make holes of 8 mm to this. 7 mm holes are not sufficient. So like that, the assembly requirements also have to be considered while modifying the design. So once you have modified the design with the suggestions of the expert, then the last stage is you have to go for the drawings. So whatever you have done till now is drawn on a sheet of paper, drawing paper. So that's what you are doing in your production drawing, you are going to do. So that is, you have to draft it on a piece of paper, which in turn has to be circulated to the workshop, to the worker for producing the component. Okay. So this is briefly the procedure of design. Now let us discuss the flow chart for this design. This is the flow chart or step-by-step procedure for the design. Okay. So as we discussed, the first stage is recognition of the problem, selection of proper material and synthesis, and then you have to analysis. You have to analyze the existing mechanism or machine, and then you have to choose proper materials. Then you have to calculate the size. So while calculating the size, you have to consider the factor of safety, and then you have to modify the design based on these requirements. So based on your experience or based on the suggestions of the experts, you have to modify the design based on the standards. So there are set of rules for making any design, okay, for manufacturing any product. So those standards has to be followed. And functional requirements I have discussed, manufacturing and assembly requirements, and also cost. This is the most important one. So you have made an excellent design, but the cost is very high. If you produce it, the cost will be high and you have to sell it at higher price, but no customer will purchase. Then there is no need of our design. So that's why you have to consider the cost also. So based on the cost also, you have to make necessary changes in the design. And finally, you have to make the drawings. Right.